Hello, this is Matt Janucki, and you're listening to Inside Men's Mental Health, brought to you by Psych Sessions. Here we explore this thing called masculinity and its impact on men's mental health, relationships, and communities. We'll learn together through conversations with thought leaders, innovators, and industry experts. Our conversations will also help us understand how these experts became interested in men's mental health and the ways their journeys have made them who they are today. In this episode, I talked with Akash Asif with the Center for Suicide Prevention in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Last summer, I had the privilege of spending some time with Akash in Vancouver, British Columbia, and heard him tell his moving story about his journey to suicide prevention work. In this conversation, Akash and I dive deeper into CSP's innovative Buddy Up program and how it's uniquely designed to help men connect and support each other. A quick note before you begin. Please be aware that this conversation does involve suicide. Thanks and enjoy. Okay, so today I'd like to welcome Akash Asif, who is the Strategy and Operations Director for the Center for Suicide Prevention in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Akash, it's great to have the opportunity to talk with you today.
Hey, thank you for having me here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, after having a chance to talk with you and spend some time with you in Vancouver last summer, and Men's Health Week there. Just great to continue that conversation today and take I think maybe a little deeper dive on some of your work today. So just really excited about it.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Um, I know from just the conversations that we had in the past that you talked a little bit about how your work hasn't always been explicitly in the mental health world, that it hasn't always been at CSP, and so wonder if you could just talk a little bit about some of your past experience, like some of the industries you worked in, and then maybe take us to kind of your transition to deciding to work at Center for Suicide Prevention, like kind of just a little bit about that
Mhm.
journey.
Yeah, I can certainly do that for you. I did begin my career in corporate downtown Calgary here, and I graduated about 10 years at this point ago, and have a degree in both psychology and business, so commerce and energy management. So just like a lot of different commerce students, my plan was to go out to downtown and climb the corporate ladder, make a lot of money, do all that jazz, and be that business guy there.
Yeah.
So I did start my career in software consulting is
Okay.
what I started, as well as business development. Um, Psychology and mental health was always a passion of mine. At the same time, it was a degree that I had done. I was always intrigued by it. So during that time while I was working, I did run a nonprofit on the side there. This nonprofit provided peer support to people dealing with mental health issues across the city of Calgary there.
Okay.
So I was doing that on the side there, working alongside my full-time job. And while I was doing that, I did have a significant incident in my life at that point, and that incident revolved around one of my colleagues about half an hour or so after we had our team one-on-one meeting, going and killing themselves. So I remember this incident take me back completely at that point there. I mean, I was supposed to be this young and upcoming kind of a guy in the corporate world. That was kind of where everything I was doing was at. Um, but it really took me to understand sort of the realities of the society and the world that we live in here. And over the next sort of 6 months, 6 to 7 months or so it was, I remember just having a lot of um, conversations with myself and conversations with the people around me. And I said to the people who were around me, um, I realized very quickly how many people were struggling with mental health. And
Yeah.
when I had coffees, or when I went out for a drink with a buddy, let's say, I realized, you know what, like this person's not only struggling with mental health, but then I started realizing that some of my friends were actually actively thinking about suicide. And that was new to me. I mean, yes, I was running my own nonprofit. Yes, I was helping in mental health and helping Calgarians on the side with that work, but it was still new to me when it started to hit home. It was like, hey, these are people in my inner circle, whether they are trying to become doctors, trying to climb the corporate ladder, going back to school, and a lot of them being men actually
Yeah.
who were dealing with these issues there. So for me at that point, I decided to make a pretty significant career transition. I went into some more education, so I completed my master's in public policy, and then I joined the Center for Suicide Prevention about 5 years ago. So for me, when I joined, I really wanted to make an impact, a positive impact. I wanted to support communities, but really, I wanted to also support my buddies who are out there. And sort of that's kind of the driving force for why I've been at the center for the last several years.
Yeah, a really uh, powerful moment, a powerful experience to lose somebody that was a colleague of yours. Just my experience that so many people have been directly impacted by suicide, myself included, losing a family member who died from suicide, and just in conversations, it just seems like so many people, when you open up that conversation, are just impacted by it. So, thanks for trusting us with that, Akash, and I, we can talk a little bit more about. I mean, I think a lot of people it impacts them, but they just kind of continue on. They continue on the path that they're on. But for you, you decided to, specifically get some more education and then go to work at the Center for Suicide Prevention. And so, particularly to make a difference around this, or maybe was that kind of your thinking? Like, I think I want to go in the mental health field. I want to impact suicide. Maybe I put words in your mouth there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, I'm not gonna say that was my one and only sort of path in that sense with Center for
Yeah.
Suicide Prevention. I mean, I feel privileged to be working here, but certainly that was the goal for me was, you know what, I want to kind of make this career transition. I want to go help and make impact on people in that sense. And mental health
Yeah.
was always a passion of mine. So whether it was mental health, suicide prevention, or just helping communities in different ways, that was was the driving force behind me sort of leaving the corporate world behind for the time being.
Yeah. Um, well, one of the things that I really want to dive into, it relates to this. You said that these conversations that you had were often with other guys,
Mhm,
and you were, it sounds like, struck by first the distress and pain
mhm,
that these guys were in, and then secondly struck by the the number of people that were struggling with, with thoughts of suicide.
mhm,
And so one of the programs, the campaigns that Center for Suicide Prevention has is the Buddy Up campaign, which is specifically a suicide prevention campaign directed towards men, which I think is quite unique and quite innovative. And so that's one of the big reasons that I really wanted to expose this to people who are listening, and talk more about it. And so I'm kind of curious about a bit of the background here, like like kind of open the veil a bit, like how does
mhm.
this kind of come about? Like how did the conversations begin around this thing for men to help them talk and open up about things? How did that maybe get started?
Yeah, I absolutely happy to go into the details there. I think when I joined the center at that point, there was some conversations around, hey, we know that men die by suicide
Yeah.
significantly more than other genders, um, and we need to do something about it. What can be a potential solution to it? And it's funny, Matt, that you mentioned kind of how the conversation started because for me the biggest thing that I wanted to bring in and the element that I wanted to bring in was I wanted to create something that actually resonates and actually builds impact with men in that
Yeah.
sense. And for me, and this is maybe my personal opinion, but I'll share it here. I felt like there was some community resources, community programs out there for men, um, but those posters were so dark looking. I mean, I
Mm,
saw these posters around the community, and you had these guys with their heads in their hands. It's the silhouette of their body,
yeah.
and it's like, call this number if you're struggling. And I remember looking at those posters and I said, like, I would not call. And
Yeah.
and and, and I'm in this field and I work here. And if I'm in that challenging space in my life, I likely won't call. So what came about those conversations were two things. One thing that came about was whatever we create, we need to create with a group of guys that can help us identify what resonates and what doesn't resonate. So, all the way from the name of the campaign, Buddy Up, to the tagline, to every aspect of the campaign, we have gone men from all different backgrounds, whether they're different demographics, age wise, geographically, different races, ethnicities, as well as different professions who have come together to help build this campaign. So we have our core people, but then we also recognize that yes, we have an advisory committee, but there's still people that we are looking to impact outside. So everything that the advisory committee has come up with over the years, we then build focus groups of males
Yeah.
to then test everything and say, hey, if you're out in the community and XYZ comes out to you, is this something that would resonate with you or not? So for us, that was the biggest first impact or first piece or element around what we wanted to do with this campaign was have it for men by men. And then the second element I would say with this campaign that really struck us early throughout these early conversations was we realized and recognized, and this was actually through inspiration from another program called Mates in Construction out in Australia. And the inspiration that we brought was brought forward to us was that men often don't want to support and help themselves.
Mm.
It's difficult. Unfortunately, society has built us and brought us to this point where um, a lot of men may feel that they're weak or they just need to chug along and just need to sort of just power through whatever they're dealing with and things will get better. So we are very unlikely to ask for help ourselves. However, we do know that a lot of men are willing to help their buddies. We're willing to take care of the people who are around us, whether those are people on our hockey team, whether those are people
Yeah.
on our sports teams, our family members. We're wanting to take care of the people around us. So the second piece outside of the advisory committees, the second piece that we built was let's build a campaign that's focused on help offering. Let's leverage what men are wanting to do and are willing to do and build off that strength versus the other way around, which is getting them to seek out help themselves. So those were in the beginning two ways that we started to differentiate this campaign from maybe some of the other programs that were out there.
Yeah, I love that. I love the just the thought and care and intentionality of, the men that are in the like the advisory group and then focus groups, and what do they want to look like, what would appeal to them, and getting lots of feedback at all levels of this, even from I remember you talking about like the even the name and trying to think about that name. And I wonder if you can just talk about that for a minute of just
Yeah.
like the thought and care of trying to think what's that name that would capture this thing, and maybe you can just like bring us into that a bit.
hmm Yeah, no, those are fun conversations. I will share. I mean, we had all different types of names that were brought forward. Some other ones, I mean, I think Wingman was another one, for instance,
Yeah.
or or just helping buddies, or different examples of it. I think for us, we wanted to be very careful with the name because once again, we wanted it to resonate with folks there. And the example that I'll bring here is, and I'll keep going back to maybe the inspiration as we have this conversation,
Yeah.
is it's mates in construction. And I remember having that conversation with a lot of the men in our group initially. And I said, there's a program called Mates in Construction. Is there a name that we can have here for Canada? And what we figured out pretty quickly was um, Mates, for instance, has a very strong definition and reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
Your mate is supposed to be someone who you're basically willing to do absolutely anything for. That is someone who is your core person and someone you can trust no matter what, is sort of the definition behind that. So we spent some time around, is there a word in sort of North America that might sort of encompass that same sort of reality, that same sort of definition to what mates as. And I think that's where we landed on for buddy up in
Yeah.
that sense, where it may still not have that same significance to it, but that buddy level, I would say, it appeals to a lot of people. And then what we did was focus group test it with different ages. And we said, you know what? Doesn't matter if you're 70, doesn't matter if you're 10, it doesn't matter if you're in if you're in rural or urban areas, anyone will understand the term buddy in that sense. And that's kind of how we came about choosing that term at that point.
Yeah, that was really just really interesting for me to hear you talk a bit about that and hearing that word mate and then try and translate that into a Canadian North American audience. And I'd never really kind of considered that and just the level of kind of thought and care and feedback around like what is this word that would capture like these uh, close male relationships, informal, but people who care about me and like what does that look like?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it seems like that's the word that fits, right? And so, but
Mm.
it was just such it was really interesting to think about that, and so I appreciate you taking us through that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I will just maybe add as well to this entire process something that I may have missed as well is we also do have a research committee with Buddy Up as well. So we wanted to make sure that yes, men told us of ideas and we tested them, but everything we did was also grounded in research and based in evidence as well. So that was
Yeah,
another piece of it. So even when it comes down to the name and stuff like that, all of this that was also vetted and reviewed by a research committee as well of suicidologist experts across Canada here.
yeah. So here's the and this is a little bit of a I'm throwing you a little like a question here, a little pitch,
Hmm.
but the you know with guys, right, the still the you talked about this some for us, Akash, with kind of this challenge to talk about what you're struggling with and some of the stigma around that, and that it is preferable like that why I might not open up to you and say like, Akash, I'm struggling, like my marriage isn't going well, or I feel really depressed, or something like that. But if you reach out to me, I might be more likely to do that. You kind of set some of these things up. Still, like, how do you get guys right to like connect and
Yeah.
have some of these hard conversations or work into hard conversations? I mean, I still think that's kind of the challenge, right? And I imagine that y'all have thought about this a bit in how to provide some tools or some kind of context that would be helpful for these guys, and
Hmm.
maybe you can help us with some of that, like how do you get them to do this, or how do you support men in doing this, and I'm wondering about how Buddy Up facilitates that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think I'll answer that in sort of two ways there. I think
Okay.
the first way that I'll answer that is how do you get guys to support each other, just generally speaking. And I think what we found is that oftentimes um, what we need to do is we need to go beyond the surface of our conversations and we need to let guys know, hey, when you say hi to your buddy or when you're having just a quick touch base with your buddy, ask them questions about how they're doing and ask them questions about their family. Don't just ask them, hey, how's it going? And they'll
Yeah.
respond, great. And you'll say,
Great.
okay,
Good.
great. Yeah, exactly. Call it a day. And you move on and you start talking about the hockey game or you talk about
Yeah.
football or whatever it
Right.
may be. Instead, is have conversations and actually get to learn about what people's lives are about. And I think that's the big thing here is connection and that sense of belonging and bringing people together is what Buddy Up is trying to do. So I'm later on or throughout this conversation, I can share more about what that connection and how we can build that connection through the campaign. But it's about bringing guys together, having conversations, and being able to understand each other. And when you're doing that, I think what we've also, when we have talked to guys about this campaign, is you're not going to always have conversations about suicide and you're not going to
Yeah.
always have
Yeah.
conversations about mental health, right? So just because your buddy or your colleague hasn't shown up to work on time for 3 days in a row does not automatically mean that you need to be worried about them and they might be thinking about suicide and you got to go in guns and blazing supporting them and saving
Sure.
them, right? It's about building those relationships, building that rapport, and going up to someone and saying, hey John, like I haven't seen you at work on time the last couple days, like what's been going on? And kind of showing that empathy and that compassion if they and what their challenge has been. Maybe they had a job loss of a family member, or maybe their schedule shifted, and being able to relate with them is important in that sense. So
Hmm.
I would say the big onus that we put on guys is to start connecting and have conversations and understand that probably more than 90% of your conversations are not going to go the route of suicide, to be very, very frank with you.
Yeah.
However, if you start talking to that individual who hasn't shown up to work late or has looked disheveled or just doesn't seem like themselves, and you figure out after a little while that they just truly aren't doing well, that's when you can have that conversation around maybe they're having thoughts of suicide and asking them the question directly, are you thinking about suicide? Which I know could be very daunting, getting guys to
Yeah.
get
Right.
to,
Of
to,
course.
to ask that question. It's not an easy question. I mean, I work for the Center for Suicide Prevention, and I'll still say that if I have to ask that question, I got to really, really get my
Yeah.
my gears going at that point there. But that's where we also support men on having those conversations with their buddies through the Buddy Up campaign here. So the campaign has a four-step conversation guide. The
Okay.
four steps of the conversation are one, they start with paying attention to, so it's important to pay attention to the people around you. So in our example, the person who hasn't shown up to work on time lately, or the person who hasn't shown up for wings lately, or someone who maybe not responding to your texts as much as they usually do. So the first step is to really pay attention to the people around you. That goes to the connection piece. The second step is to start a conversation. So that second step is really around, what have you noticed? Hey, you haven't been around for wings lately, and you're always here every Wednesday night. What's been going
Yeah.
on? Or, hey, like I've seen that you're always clean shaven, and it seems like you really let that beard go. Like, is everything okay? And starting that conversation, but then what we also recommend for men to do at that point is choose a place that you're comfortable with. Like if you hate talking over the phone, maybe don't have a phone conversation because it's already a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
Choose a comfortable setting that you're comfortable with. Third is to keep that conversation going. Like if our buddy tells us they're not doing well, and this is maybe coming back to your question here, Matt, like if you start that conversation, you've paid attention, and they tell you, you know what? I've just had a crappy, crappy month, and this is everything that's going wrong. I'm looking at potentially a divorce. I've lost my job, or just that I'm not having a great time in life. We want to change the conversation. Like I get it. Like it's awkward. It is awkward when someone says that to you. So we want to change that conversation. We want to say, hey, like I don't want to talk about this. Let's go talk about the sports game, or let's go talk about a movie or something. But it's important to keep that conversation going. And like I said earlier, if you are worried about that person, ask the question directly, are you thinking about suicide? And if you are, that's where I think it's important to continue that conversation without any judgment. And finally, our last step, and I think this is the most important step. So, first step being paying attention, second step being starting that conversation, third step being keeping that conversation going. But to me, the fourth step, which is the most important, and I think this breaks down the onus and pressure on guys, is you're a friend, you're not a counselor. So
Yeah.
that's know your role, stick to your role, connect that individual to resources, whether that's 988 here in Canada now,
Yeah.
or what other resources, what other counselors, who else have they told? But I think to me, coming all the way back circle to your question here, Matt, is you pay attention, you start that conversation, you keep it going, and you stick to your role. What we're doing is we're asking guys to connect, have those conversations, but it's not all on you now to solve that problem. You have
Yeah.
supports, you have resources, it's your responsibility. What you have to do next is to pass that person off to the proper resources. So by doing that, what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of pressure that someone has when they might even have to have these conversations with a buddy they're worried about. They don't have to do it all themselves. They're not counselors, they're a friend.
Yeah. It seems absolutely the helpful part is you don't have to solve, right, the problem, right. I think that's really important what I hear you emphasizing there, Akash. But also, what seems really helpful is a framework to work from, some structure around this, where some guys may have that framework of how to pay attention and begin those conversations and then dive into some of those harder things, right? And lean into that a bit
Yeah.
more. But other guys may just struggle with that a bit more. And so I really like the that straightforward process of how to move from this step to this step that may or may not, but if needed, could ultimately lead to where you learn about some hard things and then recommend that your buddy get some
Mhm.
get some help if you need it. And I really see that as really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will add maybe a little bit of I find this a little bit of a funny tidbit is we started with 6 steps when we started this campaign.
Okay.
And the men told us, you know what, if I'm sitting at a bar, I'm not going to read 6 steps, too long for me, cut it down. So
Yeah.
that goes back to the whole resignation piece where we're like, okay, I guess we got to cut down 2 steps. And that's kind of how we got to the 4 steps in that sense. So really listening and understanding where guys are coming from and what they want.
And one of the things that I think I saw interesting, just or thought interesting, as I looked at some of the spaces that y'all have been in, is going into some places that where there's a lot of guys that work there, like where there's you think is very stereotypically traditionally kind of male spaces, places like construction, agriculture, places like that. And seems like Center for Suicide Prevention has really had some success in finding advocates in this process
Mhm.
in these places, and that seems really exciting and encouraging.
Yeah, no, it's been terrific. And the way that the campaign works is that anyone can sign up as a champion by going to buddyup.ca. And you can sign up as a champion either as an individual or as an organization slash company there. And by signing up as a champion, all you're saying is, and there's no cost associated with it, is that, hey, I want to raise awareness for men's suicide prevention, and I want to be an advocate of the work that's been going on here. So that's where we have seen significant success when it comes down to a lot of different sectors. And funny enough, when you say the more traditional male sectors, such as maybe construction or agriculture or these sort of heavy machine operators, or
Yeah.
what we've seen is that there has been actually slow but significant uptake of the campaign within these communities there. And an example I would give here is we have one of our champions is a big construction contracting company here. And when I started talking to the champion, the lead person from that organization several years ago, this was brand new to them. They had never even talked about mental health or suicide
Yeah.
prevention. And something that Buddy Up offers is free swag to all of our champions. So swag is in the form of posters, stickers,
Yeah.
air fresheners, and so on. And what we told them was, hey, bring in some stickers this year, and that's all you need to do. See how it goes. The next year, what we said was, hey, bring in some car air fresheners and see how that goes. So what they did was they put car air fresheners in all their fleet vehicles and trucks.
Okay.
And I will share this sort of side topic conversation is air fresheners. We chose that because men are more
Yeah.
willing to chat without making eye contact with each other.
Hmm.
So we said, okay, what's a way that we can promote an item where men can have conversations where they don't have to make eye contact and it's still intimate? And a vehicle sounded great for that. So that's why we developed these car air fresheners that people can order. So that's what this company did, was bring in those air fresheners. But it got to the point where after a couple of years, we started to see the integration naturally and organically.
Mm.
People started coming up to this champion lead for this organization and said, hey, like, when's the next batch of air fresheners coming? Or, hey, I need a new sticker for my hard hat because I have a new hard
Yeah.
hat. Or, what's the buddy up number? And what they're referring to is the crisis line number.
Yeah.
And the reality is, none of these people in the last 5 or 10 years of this individual's job there had reached out about this stuff. And
Yeah.
so the goal is, I think what we are seeing is that it's slow, but the progression is there. But I think where that progression is coming from and where that success is truly coming from as well is that help offering behavior. It's more about, hey, I want to help the guys on my job site versus helping myself. But what that is doing is you're creating this culture where everyone's taking care of each other. So you might not be worried about yourself, but there's other people who are taking care of you.
Yeah, that's a great story, Akash. Just the s- the slow culture change, and I like that of hearing y'all say just try this and then try this, and just
Yeah.
the kind of incremental change to where, all of a sudden it is changed, right?
Mhm.
And what a cool story.
Yeah. I think it's all about, I think our biggest goal for implementing the campaign, whether it's an organization or community, is meet people where they're at and do things in a fashion where it's organic and it doesn't seem like it's just something that's new and fancy and just being thrown down to them. Instead, it's be intentional, figure out your goals, and then implement it in that way.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you about
Yeah.
a couple other pieces with that I think are really interesting. You've mentioned each of them, but I'll just like bring them together a little bit. Like in my world of thinking about like therapeutic interventions for men, or also kind of public health interventions for men. There's all of this discussion, and you're in this space too, Akash, of just like what will engage men in counseling, what will engage men to seek help, what will engage men to, yeah, to say that they're suffering, struggling with suicidality, right, in a way that appeals to them, that doesn't turn them off, right? And you were talking a little bit about that with the artwork that you said you saw, or just images with
Yeah.
other kind of suicide prevention campaigns. You also were talking a bit about that with your air fresheners. And I remember you talking about those air fresheners when I saw you present this last summer, and just think that is just such an interesting, neat idea. And just yeah, I think just an innovative idea. And so first, I'm just wondering about coming back to the artwork. I think your artwork that you have around Buddy Up is just really, I think it's really interesting. Like it communicates something about guys, and a diverse group and range of guys, but in a way that's, I think, kind of, I don't know. It's like it's appealing. It's informal. Like you can connect with it, right? But it's also like positive. Like it just, I don't know, all these things. Maybe I think I like it, and I knew that there was some strategic choices around it, or assumed that. Maybe you can just
Mhm.
talk us through that a bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the choices around the artwork, that because there's a lot of it with the Buddy Up campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we're super proud of the artwork
Yeah.
and super proud of some of the support that we've gotten creating that artwork there. And I think really the approach with the artwork was how can we make a super serious topic that not a lot of people want to talk about a little bit more approachable
Yeah.
and something that people can relate with. So with the tagline and the campaign's tagline is how are you really doing? What we developed was these sort of cartoon-like illustrated characters who each have their own unique story. So if you go on buddyup.ca, you can see these characters. It could be all the way from someone who is maybe a business professional and they have their story to a construction worker to an agriculture producer
Yeah.
to an older adult. And each one of these characters sort of look more cartoony and have their own story. And there's two things that I'll highlight there. I think the big thing that I'll highlight here is that we wanted people to look at those characters and read those stories and be able to relate to someone in their life. That was something that we're being able to create in a more of
Yeah.
an approachable way. And what we get often is, hey, you know what? Like you have Liam as a character. I have a friend whose name is Liam,
Yeah.
or I have someone who looks just like Clay. And we get these resonations that are formed as well as the stories that each person has, and people can relate with themselves or the people around them because that's what we're trying to accomplish here. When we look at these cartoons, they're less speaking to me as a person relating to them as my story versus do I know someone in my life who looks like that or who may have that story? So who's maybe tired or maybe who's a new dad or who's maybe
Yeah.
smoking or drinking more than usual in that
Yeah.
sense. So I think that's the big element of it. And the second approach that I would say with the artwork and the logo and cartoons and everything along those lines is we wanted to really share that anyone can be having thoughts and feelings of suicide. And what I'll bring back here is my earlier comment when I started off this dialogue with you today, is when I said that I was really shocked when some of my friends, my male friends, were thinking about suicide there. And I'll be very honest with you, when I got to Center for Suicide Prevention, I had a very sort of distinct view of who may be thinking of suicide. Someone, I'm going to be frank with some of you, someone who's maybe dealing with substance use issues, or someone
Yeah.
who's maybe
Yeah.
already depressed, someone who is houseless, for instance, in that sense.
Yeah.
I had that personal view. But what I realized very quickly is that you have people from all facets of life who may be not doing too well, either mentally or be thinking about suicide in that sense. So when you look at the artwork and you look at the characters, most of them look just like normal people that you'll see
Yeah.
walking down the street. You know, you won't ever recognize that. Like Amir, for instance, our business professional, he dresses sharp and he talks fine, right? But each one of those guys has their own sort of invitation, that paying attention, change in behavior surrounding themselves. So whether that Amir makes fun of people with depression and suicide, why is he doing that? Why is he making fun of someone? Or someone who's maybe drinking more than usual? Or someone who's maybe disheveled and more irritated and tired? Those are all attention seekers, invitations for someone to look at. So what we're trying to show with that artwork is you might on the surface think that someone's doing totally fine.
Yeah.
There are other factors, other facets in their life that you need to be paying attention to, and you need to be able to have those conversations and dig out and start those dialogues.
That's great. Yeah, I not just the artwork piece that people can connect with it, and I think that's important. That does capture it so much, Akash, to make something that's difficult, that's hard to think about, but to make it a bit more approachable. And I think that's such a accurate way to describe that. And you can tell that there's so much thought and intention that goes to those stories too,
Mhm.
that are behind those characters to really portray them in a relatable way, but just a number of different types of stories. And so I'm glad that you mentioned the stories with those characters too.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important part of engaging with your program and your materials, and just love hearing a bit more about that artwork.
Well, no, thank you. And I will say those stories, same thing as my theme throughout is what resonates and what is actually happening on the ground is important. So for each one of those stories, we went to the people that work with those folks there. So we went to the Seniors Coalition for the older
Mm.
adult story, and we went to various agriculture producers for Clay's story, who's in agriculture, and so
Yeah.
on. So we really tried to capture and make sure that we were speaking to the right people. So we weren't just making things up based off of what we might think as stereotypes, instead, really honing into some of the characteristics that may exist with some of these professions or ages or whatnot.
And I think and to come back to the other piece there, the air freshener, another tool that again I think interesting, where you think you see like think of like me growing up, like it's something like my, I don't know, like that my grandma would have in her car or something like that, right? And just, but also this thing where you picture like the two guys sitting next to each other, and then you've got the air freshener sitting up on
Yep.
the rearview mirror, and then it says, if it says buddy up, or does it say something else on
It,
it?
it, it says buddy up. Yeah.
Does it say buddy up? Okay.
Yeah.
But just that there is a kind of a reminder, right? A cue
Yeah.
to talk to each other, and that's what really struck me is, well, yeah, that's here we are together, and we've got to talk about some things or not talk about things,
Yeah.
right? But this cue for us to connect, and a reminder also,
Yeah,
ideally, right, of this framework that you talked about, right, these four steps and the structure that we have and how we can connect. And I just really liked that as this visual cue, as a reminder to ask about my buddy, right? And it seems like the feedback that you've gotten is that it connected with guys. They liked it.
absolutely. And I love the word cue there because that is absolutely what we're trying to do here, right? Like your buddy gets into your car and you have an air freshener and they read buddy up, they're probably going to ask you what that's about, right? And all of a sudden when you tell them, hey, this is a campaign that I'm supporting and it's a men's suicide prevention campaign, and if you ever want to chat, I'm with you, they might just say, okay, great, and move on.
Yeah,
But they know in the back of their mind that, hey, like it clicks, and they might come to your car a couple of times, but if they're ever struggling or if they're not doing too well, it might resonate with them is that, hey, that person who has that air freshener in their vehicle, they told me, hey, I'm a safe person. If you ever need something,
yeah,
come
yeah,
talk to me, right? So it's creating that sort of approachability with it, and that, like you said, that cue, or just like giving sort of those prompts to people to have these conversations, to even initiate that, hey, this is a topic we can talk about if it's ever needed. And it's the same thing with stickers, right? Like when it comes down to the construction guys, they love stickers on hard hats, so why not? Yeah, and who doesn't want a sticker? And
yeah,
it's that easy giveaway too, right? Like who doesn't want a car air freshener? So when we're at booths, um, versus giving someone a pamphlet, which is sometimes a little bit more difficult, you give them an air freshener, they're a lot more likely to take it. And all of a sudden,
yeah,
you're opening those channels, you're opening those gates for people who might not otherwise think about suicide.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, given how the campaign has been, you know, the ways that it's been successful, the relationships you've built, the feedback that y'all have gotten, ideas that that you have. I'm kind of wondering a little bit about what are some things maybe in store for the future of Buddy Up, and what maybe y'all are working on or thinking about as the campaign continues and as it grows.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things here. I mean, we know that June's coming up here. That's our big Buddy Up month for the
Okay.
year here. So that's our big campaign month. So we're getting geared up for that, and there's a challenge that's involved with June, and it's a bingo card of activities that we hope that people complete throughout the month to just
Okay.
drive connection and get together there. So outside of that, I think some of the other things that we've been working on is we have organizations and communities that are wanting to implement the campaign and bring in more of a suicide prevention lens into the work they're doing. So last year we did release an implementation guide and a plan that people can have as they
Okay.
implement the campaign in their organization, in their groups. So I think this year we're really working with organizations to understand their needs, their goals, and try to come up with tangible goals when it comes down to implementing the campaign. So we are doing a lot of that work, and really working with organizations in that way. But the other really cool initiative that we launched about half a year, 6 months ago, is the Buddy Up skills training.
Okay.
So outside of the campaign, what we've released is some education and some training that people can take. It's layered. The training is layered into sort of three different levels there. And the way that it works is that the first level everyone takes, and it's called being a buddy. So that level is called a buddy level. And once you've complete that level of training, which is typically a 20-minute webinar, you get
Okay.
a sticker that says, I'm a buddy, to put on the back of your phone, on your hard hat, on your laptop, and so on. And then what happens is moving forward, people are asked who wants more training, who was interested in learning more about suicide prevention. And they go on to take a half day training session, which is called Becoming a Connector. And a
Okay.
connector's job is to start conversations, and to connect people with each other. And lastly, people who take the 2 day assist training with us, very few people, so this is a bit of a pyramid as you can see
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
they become supporters. And the job of the supporter is to actively intervene with someone who may be thinking about suicide. They can do everything else, but really actively they're there for that. So the way that it works is the buddies are there to pay attention, connectors are there to start that conversation, and then supporters are there if there's something that's needed. And what you build is this community of people who are really all bought into suicide prevention, and
Yeah.
they've all sort of have a role to play. So if I'm comfortable with just paying attention and noticing that John didn't come to work on time, that's okay. That's my role. I'm a buddy. I can connect them and go to a connector and tell them, hey, this is what I'm noticing about John. So this buddy up skills training that we're implementing, and we have started to, I think we're up to about 3 companies that are implementing it at different job sites, is really about giving everybody a role to play in suicide prevention. It breaks down the stigma, and it tries to create that environment where people are willing to offer help, but also it's a lot easier to ask for help when
Yeah.
every single person is bought in as well. So that's kind of the new and exciting stuff that we're working on as we kind of go in from the campaign world to more of the providing training and education to some of our champions who've been implementing the campaign over the last several years.
Yeah, that's great to think about the providing that community of support or building that community of
Yeah,
support, and then also overlaying those additional skills, right?
exactly.
To help men. And so that's exciting. Well, thanks for giving us a kind of a preview or some insight into how things are growing and moving forward. It sounds like there's just a lot of things to be excited about with Buddy Up.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we're excited too. I think at the end of the day, I think really when we work with either an individual or a group or a community, it's all about meeting them where they're at and what they need. So, like I said in my earlier story, it could be a matter of going all in and taking all the training that we have available, or it can just be a matter of, hey, bring in some stickers and put them in the kitchen and
Yeah,
see what happens, right? It's
yeah.
all about meeting people and not having those expectations and giving people the ability to organically build and create that culture change wherever that may be.
Well, anything else to like point us to as far as either about Buddy Up or Center for Suicide Prevention? I mean, you've given us a lot of ideas of resources, et
Yeah.
cetera. But anything else that maybe we haven't hit today of Kosh around, like what you do and what your center does that would be helpful to highlight for folks?
Yeah, I think one thing that I might leave off with here
Okay.
is that Center for Suicide Prevention is an education center, and our mandate really is to equip people with the skills that are necessary to respond to someone who may be considering suicide. So we do that in various ways, Buddy Up being one of our campaigns, but we do have the largest library of suicide-related items in the world within our office here in Calgary, in Canada. And we have librarians and we have knowledge translation staff that take all of the literature that's coming out across the world and synthesize that into easy to read formats. So whether that's social media posts, blog posts, brochures, and so on. So as even though we talked a lot about men today,
Yeah.
if anyone's listening who's interested in something else, or you're like, hey, I'm curious about this population suicide, or this topic around suicide prevention, certainly you can reach out to one of our librarians by going to suicideinfo.ca, as that'll kind of open the doors, and we'd be happy to support you with all the literature that we have in-house around all that material that you might need.
Great. Okay, Kosh. Well, thank you very much. I think that's a good stopping place. Thank you for your time. You're a
Yeah,
busy guy with a lot of things going on, and so thanks for making a little time for me today. It was a privilege.
totally awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the long weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, Akash. Bye
All
bye.
right, bye bye.